Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com, how to make knife handles or scales from firewood. Now this knife project started with a piece of leaf spring, automotive leaf spring, and a log, a piece of firewood log, which I found in the backyard. I'm not sure what type of wood it is. I believe it's maple, but when I cut into that log, I found some really cool lines and designs and shading. This is the start, the piece of wood that I started with, and all I did was took a chainsaw and I cut a couple of slivers out of that wood. And here you can see the first chunk, and you can see the color variations, which are just really cool. The problem is that this wood has been drying out for a few years, and it's also got a bunch of cracks, and it has a bunch of wormholes or grub holes. So we're going to have to preserve that wood. Harden it up so that it can be polished, fill in all those wormholes with epoxy, colored epoxy, and then finish off the scales. So the project basically starts with that hunk of wood, and I'm just picking the area or the spot on the wood that I want to use for the scales, just an area away from the center. The center seems to be a little bit softer than the outside, and a piece that has some really cool lines and colors. I actually even like those wormholes. So I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to cut it right down the middle. Once you sand this down a little bit, you'll really start to see the character of this piece of wood. So these are the two blanks that I ended up with. Now, the first and probably the most important step in this whole process is to preserve that wood. You can see all the dust from the wormholes, etc., and the cracks. Years ago, I worked with some wood that I had recovered from a shipwreck, and I learned that one way to preserve it was to soak it in a solution, a 50-50 solution of paint thinner and polyurethane. And what happens is that the paint thinner thins the polyurethane and drags it deep into the wood. It gets absorbed very quickly, deeply into the wood, and then it evaporates and it leaves the polyurethane filling up the cell structure of the wood, and hopefully will prevent future cracking. I soaked it in that mixture of 50-50 paint thinner and polyurethane for about 2 days, and then let it dry for a full day in my boiler room. Then I took the piece and I started to work with it. So I'm just using a disc grinder with a flat sanding wheel to sand it down to the desired thickness. And I just have a 40 grit paper on here, so just very quickly moves through this material. Then I went over to a belt sander and I smoothed that all out so that it's all level. It doesn't have the ridges and the groove lines from the disc grinder. And as I'm sanding it, I think I'm very happy with my choice of using this piece of wood because of those colors and the grain and I've actually even liked, like I said, the wormholes and the black lines. So I traced the knife handle that I wanted to create just using a Sharpie marker, and I'm going to cut it out with a pin saw. I am cutting this slightly larger than I needed, so I'm going to cut on the outside of that Sharpie marker line, so that I'm going to end up with a blank or scale that's slightly larger than the finished product is going to be. It's going to overhang the full tang of the knife at this point. I am going to mark how wide I want it to be, especially at the very front edge of the knife handle, because we're basically going to attach these knife handles to the tang of the knife, and then we're going to finish forming it. But that forward edge would be very, very hard to finish sanding without damaging the brass on the hilt. So holding that wood firmly as far forward as it can go, I'm going to drill the pinholes. These happen to be 1/4 inch, whatever size pinholes you're using. I'm then going to put a pin through the one hole before I drill the second hole, and it just kind of helps it hold in place. You could certainly clamp this to the knife and then drill it, put it in a vise, however you do. So now we've got the 2 1/4-inch pinholes. I am going to just roughly sand that handle down a little bit, make it a little bit thinner toward the forward edge, round it over a little bit. Most of the work I'm doing at this point is really towards that forward edge of the scales. You still want to come down just a little bit more. And a belt sander is great for this. Now, when I say these scales are made out of firewood, definitely was a piece of firewood from my backyard, but it is hard, so it is kind of important to use hardwood for these handles, especially for the durability. All right, so that scale is roughed to size. Once both are rough to size, we're going to attach them to the knife. And I'm just using a 2-part epoxy. I've mixed a little bit of black paint in with that epoxy. Mix it thoroughly so that the hardener and the epoxy are completely mixed together, as well as the black paint. You could use clear if you wanted. You could use another color if you wanted, brown or red or whatever you wanted to do. But I wanted the black to kind of go along with the black lines in the wood. So really what we're going to do is we're just going to coat the wood scales. We're going to coat the each side of the tang of the knife, and we're going to put a little of this 2-part epoxy on each one of the pins, and then we're going to press everything together and clamp everything together and let that harden overnight, so that that epoxy can fully cure and kind of hold everything in place. Basically, these knife scales just get attached to the blade the same way most full tang scales do. Probably the one thing I didn't do here is I probably should have covered the blade with a little bit of painter's tape so that I didn't get any of the epoxy on the blade, which is kind of a pain in the neck to clean up. So anyway, these are the scales or the handles clamped to the blade. They're just going to sit there for 24 hours and dry, completely cure. And once that epoxy is cured, we can release the clamps, and then we can get to work on finish forming those handles. And the first step in that process is going to be to cut off the excess pins which are sticking through both sides. And for that, I just went over to a bandsaw. And you want to cut these as close as you can to the wooden handles, but you certainly don't want to gouge into the wood. We'll finish these off on the belt sander and make them perfectly flush. And now we go back to the belt sander, and we're going to basically sand away all the excess epoxy, and we're going to start to shape those handles to the desired shape that we want, as well as bring it into the exact outline of the knife handle, or of the tang of the knife. And this is a fairly slow process. You just have to take your time. You make a pass, you look to see what's uncovered, how much more you still have to grind. This is a 80 grit paper on this 4-inch belt sander. And I'm going to bring down those handles, that wood scales, so that they're perfectly flush with the tang of the knife. I will have to repolish that tang, which is just a matter of going through different sandpapers. I'm using a 1-inch belt sander to do kind of the inside edge and the curves. It's just a different tool that you can use. And then a lot of times I'll actually finish forming these handles with a Dremel grinder. A Dremel grinder is also great for getting in to the small spaces and really shaping the handles exactly the way you'd like them. And on the Dremel, I'm just using a drum sanding wheel. You can get these in a variety of different grits. Now we're still not done. We still have to fill in a few cracks as well as those grub holes. I'm going to do a sanding now. This is a 220 grit. So that basically after the sanding, the knife handles will be done except for that final epoxy. I'm going to fill in the cracks and I'm going to fill in the grub holes with the same 2-part epoxy. And I'm also going to do it mixed with a little black paint. And again, you could do this clear, you could do it with a color so that the grub holes kind of stand out a little bit more. But for the colors on this particular handle, the black seemed to be what I thought would look best. Now I did have to do 2 coats of this. I thought I'd only have to do 1 to fill in each one of the holes, but as it was drying, some of it kind of ran out, and the holes were kind of hollowed out a little bit. So what I did in between is I sanded in between, and then I gave it another coat of this 2-part epoxy glue. I let it cure overnight, and then I'm just basically going to go back to that same 220 grit sandpaper or sander and sand off all of the glue that's messing up the handle or out of those grub holes. And it's going to leave the black epoxy in the holes, which can be polished. It really gives a nice effect. And you can finish this off with a finer sandpaper if you'd like, right? You can sand it by hand, you can really polish it up, and then you can finish treating it with an oil, or if you prefer, you can polyurethane it. I was very pleasantly surprised that the handle took the oil, because I wasn't 100% sure it would after the treatment of the 50-50 poly and paint thin. But yeah, it really seemed to hold the oil very well, and I was very pleased with the way this came out, especially since it's just a hunk of wood from the backyard. Anyway, please check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thank you.